Hello and welcome. This is a presentation focused towards camp coordinators, and it shares a few simple ideas for being a great leader this summer. This is part of my PIPD program, Course 3420. So my first big idea is about Dr. Seuss and his idea that we need to be authentic. So we probably all heard the quote, "Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind." To me, there's nothing more important than this. Whatever you think you should be or want to be, it has to start from being your authentic self. So of course, growth and development requires us to make changes and continue to learn. But this needs to be grounded in a strong sense of who we are and in a style that's entirely our own. Sometimes being in a new role can be really scary and you can feel out of place. If you look at this picture, you notice how all the little bunnies are hopping around, except one penguin, who's dressed as a bunny. And sometimes this is how it feels to be in a new position. As you're all embarking on your journey this year, you might be thinking of the people who have come before you as camp coordinators. They're amazing, legendary people who have run camp in such a great way, and you hold them in super high esteem. And that's awesome. And use what you learned from them. But don't stop being you and doing things your own way. We see others as being the bunnies, and ourselves as the penguin, who's just an imposter waiting to be found out. This is called imposter syndrome. But let me assure you, you're all bunnies. No two bunnies are the same, and it's normal to feel like a penguin. The next thing I want to talk about is plunging toilets. So where are you when the tough gets going? So I think that anyone who has worked with me before has heard me talk about the necessity of plunging the toilets as being the coordinator's job. This idea really started for me in my first year as a coordinator. We had a terribly challenging year, and plunging the toilets became an incredible part of my job. And this is for a number of reasons. The first is that counselors are busy. So busy. So are programmers. So are the nurses. And if the toilets get clogged and they're suddenly in a big mess, they don't really have time to plunge the toilet. The other reason is you let your staff know that when the situation gets a little messy, you're there for them. You might not be able to support them in their every move, but when they really need you, there you are. Another reason is equality. So I don't believe that anyone is too good for any job. Simple as that. Just because you're the coordinator doesn't mean you don't plunge toilets. And this is symbolic for a lot of things. Sometimes when the staff need you, there you are. The other reason is bonding. So when you show up with your plunger in the middle of a poocident, you're really able to bond with staff and campers because you're right there in the thick of it. And you can laugh about it and debrief it later. So don't forget to plunge your toilets this summer. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is really a camp objective, and one that I think is so important in developing your leadership skills. So it's about celebrating who you are. Of course, this comes back to the authenticity piece. Utilize your super skills and utilize those of the people around you. If you have someone who's great at doing something, let them do it. Celebrate them for it. And camp is inherently amazing at this. As you go out into the real world, you'll realize not every place is amazing at doing this. So this doesn't mean to ignore the things that we need to get stronger at, but rather that we should stop focusing on just developing our weaknesses into strengths. Why not build from strengths? This is called strengths-based leadership. Okay, the next one is all about robots needing love too. So as coordinators, it can be easy to think we need to be robots. We need to put on our protective armor and don't show our feelings. Don't show our vulnerability when we mess up or we don't know the answer. Because we think that that's what staff want to see from us. But I don't think that this is what helps our staff feel safe and supported. I remember being a counselor, and a coordinator of mine told me about some of her challenges. And this is someone that I looked up to, and still do, so very much. And this made me feel safe to share my own insecurities, because I knew that it would be met with empathy and not judgment. When I think about who I've bonded with the most, particularly in coworkers, it's always about who shows their vulnerability, shows that they are human, show that they are able to open themselves up and expose themselves to the people that they are trusting. To to be okay with not knowing an answer, to be okay with saying, sorry, I messed that up. This takes confidence and humility. So Brene Brown defines vulnerability beautifully. She says, I define vulnerability as emotional risk, exposure, and uncertainty. It fuels our daily lives. And I've come to the belief that vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. To be vulnerable, to let ourselves be seen, to be honest. So let me go on the record and say, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. To create is to make something that has never existed before. There is nothing more vulnerable than that. Every year at camp is unique and different. We want to create something that has never existed before. And this requires innovation, creativity, and change. And we can't have those things unless we are sure that staff can be vulnerable. Okay, along the stream of creating unique experiences for camp, what's in your Camptionary? So each community has a common language, common traditions, and understanding. And this creates a sense of belonging for people. I found this sign in Bali, and it totally cracked me up. It was just all over the place, but nowhere else in Southeast Asia, or even elsewhere in Indonesia. It's part of the local culture, part of what makes it unique. So when we think about creating a unique camp, or community for camp, we need to think about the community's communication. What kind of language are we teaching our staff to use? So as you take your team through training, there's lots of opportunities to develop a common language that can come up throughout the summer as a door opening to dialogue. Lots of this will come out really naturally, but it's up to you to really foster that growth and foster that development of the language. Now, on the theme of creating a unique summer experience, I want you to think about creating unique traditions and rituals. So holidays are full of tradition, and so is camp. Traditions and rituals bond us together, and they help to develop that common sense of belonging. So my family is a blended family, and with a blended family comes challenges of shared traditions, especially around the holidays, because each family, especially the children, genuinely believe that their traditions are the right traditions to follow. So in my family, something we all bonded over was Seinfeld. And one day, my mom found a recipe for chocolate babka. Now, babka is a Jewish cake that Jerry and Elaine talk about a lot in the show Seinfeld. And once my mom found a recipe, she started to make it for us. And we all loved it, and we loved the fact that it was from Seinfeld. But before long, my mom decided it was a bit too much work to make on a regular basis. So it suddenly became a Christmas tradition for us. So every year now, my mom makes babka for our family breakfast on Christmas. If you miss Christmas, you miss babka. And it's a bit strange, considering it's a Jewish cake, and none of us are Jewish, and we eat it on Christmas, which is not a Jewish holiday. But for my family, it's what we talk about before Christmas. It's what bonds us together. Is she going to make a cinnamon babka this year, or a chocolate babka? What's it going to be like? Should we eat it before presents or after presents? We center everything around the babka. And it reminds us that we're a family, and that we have a shared history, and that we all belong in the family. The same thing happens at camp, and there's lots of rituals and traditions that happen every year. And we want to think about why we do them. And we also want to think about what is going to give our staff a sense of belonging for this year. Do you start each day with a particular cheer? Do you start each meeting in a certain way? Does every week end with a game that you play? Now, many of these traditions and rituals will happen organically, but I believe it's important to cultivate them and be intentional about them. So help your community to create a unique experience. This is part of what being a coordinator is. It's a different role, and it has a lot to do with intentionality. It's taking things one step further and helping to develop intentional community. Coordinating is full of opportunities to practice our leadership styles, and leadership is different for everyone. And as far as I'm concerned, at the end of the day, what's most important is that you're leading from your heart and enabling others to be their very best selves, to help to make camp the best place on earth for campers. Thank you very much. I hope that this is helpful for you and that we can chat about it in person sometime soon.